What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Off the Top Rope here on the Off the Mic Sports Network. So obviously we're heading into All In Texas on Saturday, and what's crazy about this is really since the beginning of the week, a lot of the news cycle surrounding AEW has not been around the pay-per-view that's happening. It's a lot of external bullshit. I already talked about the whole feud that's going on. JD from New York, Sean Ross Sapp, Ricochet doing a bunch of bullshit. I've talked about Britt Baker. She came up on this media call. Mercedes Monet and her creative control has obviously been a big topic of discussion for a long time, but specifically heading into this match with Toni Storm on Saturday for the Women's World Championship, it's really came to light. And listen, people could say what they want about Sean Ross Sapp. I do respect some of the work that he has done. He has some great intel. But some of the stuff that was handled on Tuesday on that media call, literally he's the first question on the board, could ask about anything. And he brings up this topic of creative control because he's been hammering it home more than anybody that, hey, it's contractual. Hulk Hogan had it in his contract 30 years ago. And listen, I get what Sean's saying. I get, and I like I said, people at Fightful, there are aspects of the work that they do that I do respect. But this was not the way to go about things. And my question is, because Tony Khan went on like about a 5 or so minute diatribe about how Mercedes does not have creative control and he is the end all be all of this company. And I also even cite JD from New York and Jesse Chi-Town Smark from their show. I do watch their stuff. I don't necessarily agree with all of what they do, but they always have kept it real about AEW. And it's you can't really tell me with a straight face that there isn't some sort of influence going on within Tony Khan. Because as I have said, from jump, from when I started this channel and I started talking about AEW to the masses, I have always said Tony Khan is a fucking mark. He's also a coward who will not tell the wrestlers he's paying inordinate sums of money and giving them all these free. Because what was one of the big draws of people going to AEW from the beginning? Freedom. And you've got freedom. You may not have like necessarily like the technical definition of creative control, but these wrestlers, whether it be Chris Jericho, whether it be John Moxley, whether it be the Young Bucks, CM Punk is a great example. They gave CM Punk his own fucking show as an active performer and gave him authority over how to shape the show just so he'd stay there. And I give JD credit for pointing that out because, yes, CM Punk had about as much pull in that place as anybody because you want to know why? Who was the biggest CM Punk mark in that place? It was fucking Tony Khan. And it broke his heart to have to fire his hero after he made a public embarrassment of them backstage with that footage. And it got so ugly that he's been airing all this dirty laundry over the last couple of years. So what naturally, so my question is, what is AEW hiding here when they're saying, Mercedes doesn't have creative control? You know what I see? Tony Khan does not want to see a similar situation play out in the women's division because Mercedes Moné, in her past, fair or not, has walked out of WWE twice because she didn't get something that she wanted. WrestleMania 35, her and Bayley lost the tag team titles. And famously, they were on the floor in a hotel room. There were stories about that were very public. And a lot of people thought that Sasha Banks was not going to come back. She did come back after SummerSlam that year and went on to have another women's championship run, which was a couple of women's championship runs in COVID, which were great. She had the short title run in the Thunderdome era, or the Performance Center in Thunderdome era. And then she had that great title run where she beat Bayley in Hell in a Cell and then went into WrestleMania 37 as the champion against Bianca Belair. Only they're one of five. They're two of five women who have ever main evented WrestleMania. There's Ronda Rousey, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and then there's obviously Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné, and Bianca Belair. Bayley hasn't even main evented WrestleMania. So there's only 5 women who've ever main evented it. So that's saying something. Okay, Rhea Ripley hasn't even main evented a WrestleMania yet in the 2-night format. So but then, like, obviously after WrestleMania 38, she's a tag team champion with Naomi. She walks out after they were going to have to job out to, I think one of them was going to have to face Bianca Belair. One of them was going to have to face Ronda Rousey, even though they were tag team champions. Just created differences. They left their titles on the table in front of Vince McMahon. They walked out of the company. And Naomi's been able to bridge the gap and come back. And she's in the middle of her best run of her entire career. And she's going to probably be the women's champion as soon as SummerSlam. Maybe if not sooner, I don't know. But you look at this whole situation, and I think what the Tony Khan is trying to, at best, to not only protect Mercedes Monet, but protect his own ass. But at the same time, he's making himself look like a complete and utter schmuck here. Like he looks like he looks like the biggest geek of all time. It's like, okay, yeah, okay, so you're talking about having a bench, and you have your number one star who came in the women's division in Britt Baker, and you're saying she's benched, and you're trying to make that comparison to a sports team, yet Mercedes Moné doesn't have creative control, and she's in all these title matches. Like, listen, Mercedes is obviously pitching ideas of what she wants to do. I don't necessarily know, like, if she's the one pitching these victories or not. You guys can surmise about, okay, she's Mercedes Hogan or not. But the point being, and, the other stuff out of the company, she's that big of a deal but she's also making the move to go to these places and get all these championships. But in terms of AEW specifically, I think Tony Khan is paralyzed in fear that if he makes one wrong move, Mercedes is going to blow up and leave. So he's got to give her heaven and earth. And on some level, I get that, because his hero, CM Punk, walked out of that place and did not like the way that things were run. He said it wasn't a real business. And then it got so damaging because CM Punk kept airing dirty laundry that Tony Khan decided, hey, I'm going to air security footage from All in London, my biggest event that almost got ruined, to just make a point. And it made him look petty. It made him look ridiculous. And, it's just been a microcosm of just how poorly AEW has been run. Like, the one draw to AEW that has been consistent with this place is creative freedom. Like, they have freedom to do and say what they want. And, like, the higher level people are able to craft stories because, one, we know Tony is a mark. We also know that he's not very creative. So, yeah, I mean, naturally, of course, you're going to want to make Mercedes look strong and win. But, in terms of, like, the imaging and the branding and all this stuff, Tony's not going to say no. So effectively, that is in some form a creative control type of thing. It's not contractual, but she's got heavy influence about what's going on there, because she's probably the highest paid woman that's ever been there. She's one of the highest paid women in the industry. And you know what? She's gotten that contract and that level of authority on merit. But at some point, if you're Tony Khan, you've got to step in and understand what is right and what is wrong. And a lot of the fan base, some of them say that Mercedes is the greatest. A lot of the fan base is really annoyed. A lot of just wrestling fans alike are annoyed with all these championships and all these victories, and, like, how the women's division in AEW has been portrayed as a result of, this massive push. And that's because Tony is not a creative enough thinker to, like, hey, he's got to have people who are reliable enough and good storytellers enough to create compelling television. That's the Death Riders thing has gone on for fucking ever. If Tony had any sense and had any authority, like he says he does, this would have been over at Dynasty, because Swerve Strickland was right there, and it was right there for the taking. But, hey, they had a direction they wanted to take this All in. So if they had any foresight, they would, but no, Jon Moxley has got some level of pull in that respect. Chris Jericho, all the different iterations of him. Like, I mean, the Inner Circle was fine. It may have went on too long. Jericho Appreciation Society was bad. And then the Learning Tree. Don't even get me started on the Learning Tree. Guys, Ring of Honor championships and, FTW. The FTW title was defended at All In. Under no circumstances should that ever happen. Ring of Honor championships are making it on the AEW shows. That is all Chris Jericho, because Tony Khan is not saying no to Chris Jericho. He's had a long history and a long pedigree. And like I said, Tony is a mark. So when we talk about this whole thing and piece it all back together, I think Tony is just paralyzed in fear. And also, he is a fucking mark. And he does not want to see another public blow up look bad on him because he doesn't want to be the authoritative leader that he should be. He's too busy being buddy buddy. He's too busy being a fan. He's a fan with a large bank account because his dad is rich. He is rich as well. They run sports teams and stuff. And so, because he's a pro wrestling fan and there was a starvation in the fan base for this, and, obviously Vince McMahon not giving very much creative freedom to the members of the WWE roster, it has led to this. Mercedes is just a product of the way that this whole thing has been run for almost for 6 years. That's really what this is. Mercedes is the most visible product of this because she's got all these titles. She hasn't lost. The women's division that she came in to basically help fix is in the worst state that it has ever been. They so much so that they're going into a champion versus champion match where only one title is on the line. Granted, I understand the significance of Mercedes versus Tony, but the reason why this has gotten so much mainstream play is because, again, this is just another product. And then I don't understand why the media and why everybody alike has just got to protect everybody's ass here. Like, we can all see it in plain sight. We can see it all in plain sight. Like, I don't understand. Like, Sean Ross Sapp can have good reports, but going through and through and through, and your one constant example of creative control is Hulk Hogan. And like I said, I give a ton of credit on the post show for Off the Script. JD from New York came up with a bunch of these examples that basically illustrate one of the founding principles of AEW was creative freedom for the wrestlers because they didn't have it in WWE. So, like I said, I'm not necessarily saying that like it is creative control, like the technical, it's creative control in name only, whatever you however you want to call it. Because listen, there's so many different examples across this company of like storylines that should have been nipped in the bud because and if he is the end all be all and he was able to say no to his stars, like, maybe Adam Copeland doesn't get a world title shot. Maybe maybe Chris Jericho and all of his different iterations of his group don't get as much TV time. Maybe Mercedes Monet isn't challenging for the women's championship this year, although I think that's partly some of his influence. Because he has been on record saying, I wanted to have this match for a year, which is still bizarre to me, and I think they just rushed it. But it's because Tony doesn't have any creativity, so he's got to rely on the talented people around him because he's never run a wrestling company before. He's a fan. That's the thing. So I think the one thing that I've learned from, this whole experience, because I know a lot of Mercedes marks have come at me, and I don't want to get it twisted. I still have the utmost respect for everything that woman has done for the industry and for women's wrestling. I recognize her contribution. She's a first ballot Hall of Famer. Absolutely. But her reputation has not looked good in this at all because perception is everything. And when you see the way that this whole thing has matriculated out, and now people are making excuses. Tony Khan's making excuses. Everybody's making mistakes for Tony Khan. And again, it goes back to my point. What was the founding principle of AEW? Creative freedom. So Moxley, some of these other wrestlers don't even need creative freedom because they're so fucking talented. Like look at fucking Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland. Made one of the greatest feuds ever. And, maybe they didn't need writing and maybe they didn't need maybe they got their own creative freedom because they're able to create captivating television. They understand nuances of wrestling. But I mean, it's just so frustrating, man. So we'll see where it all goes. We'll see what happens on Saturday. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon. Bye-bye.